Welcome back to Voice in Christ. What you are about to see is one of the most daring rescues in the entire Bible. It's a story of impossible odds, a nephew in chains, and a man of faith who refused to back down. Stay with me because this incredible story could change the way you see God's power in your own life today. Our story begins in a place of peace, Hebron. After his long journeys, Abram had finally settled there. Beneath the ancient, sprawling oaks of Mamre, he had built an altar to the Lord. This wasn't just a pile of stones. It was a sacred space, a symbol of worship, trust, and the covenant God had made with him. Imagine the scene. The air is calm, the sun warms the earth, the flocks are grazing peacefully, and the herds roam freely across the hills. Life for Abram and his household was quiet, blessed, and stable. But far away, on the distant horizon, the low rumble of war was growing louder, like a gathering storm about to break. Soon, that distant storm arrived at Abram's doorstep. Travelers began to appear at his camp, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. They brought shocking news from the Jordan Valley. 4 powerful kings from the east had united their armies, forming a fearsome coalition. Their leader was Chedorlaomer of Elam, and with him were Tidal of Goyim, Arioch of Elasar, and Amraphel, the king of Shinar. For 12 long years, these eastern kings had ruled the cities of the Jordan Valley with an iron fist. But in the 13th year, the local kings had had enough. 5 cities, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Beeroth, up in rebellion. It was a bold move, a declaration of freedom. But the eastern kings were not known for forgiveness. They were coming to crush this rebellion and make an example of them all. The invasion was swift and brutal. The 4 kings swept across the land like a raging fire, a storm that no one could stop. They were relentless. They defeated the Rephaim giants, who were legendary for their strength. They toppled fortified cities that had stood for generations, crushing tribes that had never known defeat. Their path was one of destruction and conquest. Finally, their massive army arrived in the valley of Siddim, what we know today as the Dead Sea. The 5 kings of the valley, the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, and their allies, gathered their men to make a stand. They were desperate to defend their homes and their freedom, but their armies were completely outmatched. They were about to face a force unlike any they had ever seen. The Battle of Siddim was a slaughter. Swords clashed, shields rang, and the cries of battle and pain echoed across the valley. The resistance was fierce but futile. The armies of the valley kings broke and fled in terror. The unique landscape of the valley became a death trap. Some soldiers fell into the deep tar pits that dotted the area, while others scrambled for their lives into the surrounding hills. With the armies defeated, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were left defenseless. The victorious eastern kings plundered them, stripping them bare of all their food, their wealth, and their possessions. And in the midst of this chaos and violence, a terrible thing happened. Abram's own nephew, Lot, who had chosen to live in Sodom, was taken prisoner. He was bound in chains and carried away with all the other captives, his future looking impossibly bleak. But one man escaped the carnage. His clothes were torn, his feet were bleeding, and his heart was racing with terror and adrenaline. He ran, not looking back, pushing through the pain, driven by a single purpose: to warn Abram. He finally staggered into Abram's peaceful camp at Hebron and delivered the devastating news. "The kings have conquered," he gasped. "Sodom has fallen, and Lot is taken." The words hung in the air, shattering the peace of Abram's home. In that moment, something ignited within Abram. A fire burned in his heart. The quiet shepherd, the wandering patriarch, was about to become a warrior. Love for his family demanded action. Abram didn't hesitate for a second. There was no debate, no council of war, no weighing the odds. He immediately called upon his own men, 318 of them, all trained and born within his own household. These weren't professional soldiers or mercenaries. They were shepherds, servants, and herdsmen. But they were loyal, they were disciplined, and they trusted their master completely. Abram also called upon his allies, his neighbors Mamre, Eshcol, and Aner, who readily agreed to join him. This small, unconventional force set out under the cover of night. They were marching against a victorious, battle-hardened army that numbered in the thousands. The odds were overwhelmingly, impossibly stacked against them. But Abram had something the eastern kings didn't. He had faith. A deep, unshakable faith that the God who had called him and promised him a great nation would not abandon him now. He believed God would fight for them. The pursuit was grueling. Night after night, Abram and his small band of men followed the trail of destruction left by the conquering army. They saw the evidence of their violence everywhere: burned supply carts, ruined encampments, and the countless footprints of a massive force on the move. And among those tracks were the drag marks of chains and the weary footprints of the captives, including Lot. The journey was long, exhausting, and filled with danger. At any moment, they could be discovered. But Abram never wavered. His resolve was like steel. He was driven by a powerful combination of love for his nephew, raw courage, and an absolute trust in God's power to deliver. Finally, near the northern city of Dan, Abram's scouts spotted them, the enemy camp. Thousands of soldiers rested under the moonlight, celebrating their victory, confident that they were safe and far from any threat. They had no idea that a rescue mission was closing in. But Abram wasn't just courageous, he was clever. He formulated a daring plan. He divided his small force into several groups, silently surrounding the vast enemy camp from multiple sides. Then, under the thick cover of darkness, he gave the signal. The attack began. Torches were thrown into tents, setting them ablaze. Shouts and battle cries erupted from all sides at once. Total panic erupted among the sleeping soldiers. They had no idea how large the attacking force was. In their confusion and fear, the Eastern king's armies scattered, running for their lives. Abram and his men chased them north, all the way to a place called Hobah, beyond the great city of Damascus. By the time the sun rose, the impossible had been achieved. The victorious army was defeated, and every single captive was freed. Lot was safe. Abram returned south, not as a conqueror, but as a rescuer. He led the caravan of freed people and the recovered goods, a procession of hope and redemption. In the Valley of the Kings, two very different figures came out to meet him. The first was the humbled, defeated king of Sodom, who owed Abram everything. The second was a mysterious and powerful man named Melchizedek. He was the king of Salem, the city of peace and a priest of God. Most High, he didn't come with demands or political proposals. He came bearing simple gifts, bread and wine, and he gave Abram a profound blessing, saying, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." In that moment, Abram bowed in humility, giving a tenth of everything to Melchizedek. He knew this victory was not his. It did not come from his strength, or his strategy, or his 318 men. It came from God alone. That night, back in the safety of Hebron, Lot rested free from his chains, thanks to his uncle's incredible faith. Abram stood outside his tent, gazing up at the same stars God had once told him to count. He remembered God's promises. This battle had proven something profound. It wasn't won by numbers, or by military might, or by human cleverness. It was won by faith. Simple, active, courageous faith. God had done exactly what Melchizedek said. He had delivered Abram's enemies into his hands. And Abram believed him. If this story reminded you of God's incredible power and his unwavering faithfulness, don't let the inspiration end here. Subscribe to Voice in Christ for more powerful Bible stories, miracles, and moments of real hope. The next chapter of Abram's journey and his walk with God will inspire you even more. Subscribe now and be ready to witness God move in your life. Thank you for watching.